Let me clear my screen really quickly. All right, that should be good. I think that should be good. Drink some water because I'm dehydrated. But gonna launch right into this live stream, and that is the topic is religion and are religions and cults the same thing? That is the question for my topic. And we'll see if people participate. If not, so be it. But let me just make sure that the visibility of the stream is public. I'm pretty sure it is, but I want to double check. What's up, Carlton? It's pretty late. This is normally later than I would normally stream. So I'll see how long I can keep this up before I get too tired. And I've had coffee like 2 hours ago, so um, the fact that I'm still tired shows that I'm used to it. I've been used to like a schedule. Oh, I'm checking the wrong. Checking the wrong website. I'm supposed to be checking. Supposed to be checking YouTube Studios, and I was checking my Streamlabs dashboard. Um, yeah, the visibility is public, so yeah. Um, so you can see it. I mean, and so everyone can see it. Cause it's get that resting, bro. Oh yeah, well, I'm not planning on staying on long. Uh, I was just gonna see how many people actually appear in the chat room, and I don't expect a lot of people to come into the chat room because usually I I will have my best analytics late in the evening, but I'm not willing to stay up late in the evening to do so. So I'm a I'm gonna give it a few minutes and see how it goes. And if there are a lot of people participating or interested in a topic, then of course I'm gonna keep it going and just chalk it up to like some caffeine in the morning. So for everyone coming into the live stream, hello, I'm Just A Contrarian. And the topic for my live stream is whether religions and cults are the same thing. Uh, there, there are reasonable arguments to be had on both sides of that debate. So, on one hand, organized religion does retain many of the aspects that people would find in a cult, particularly a religious cult. Carlton says, "Hit the like button, everyone." But yeah, so I mean, obviously there's the supernatural aspects to it, but beyond that, there's the coming together in union with other people um, to uphold the same beliefs. There's sort of the separating of people from their other social activities, sometimes even their family and friends, depending on how devout the follower is of that religion. Um, there can be a grooming process, just like there are in cults. There can be a grooming process where they initially just ask people to come so they could visit and show them, a little bit about their organization or church or religion or whatever. And initially it's just like, hey, why don't you hang out with us, that sort of thing. And then it becomes a little bit, then gradually they start asking you if you're willing to like help them do a few things, like, hey, could you pass out a few flyers, or hey, would you be willing to come in, we're going to all have pizza and talk about, more about what the religion is about, stuff like that. Then the grooming gets a little bit more in depth, where they start handing you responsibilities for the religious meetings, and pretty soon you're a full-fledged member with responsibilities, not only for the church or the organization or whatever, but also in bringing in other people, other like-minded people as well. And sometimes uh, persuading them to be a part of the religion or the organization. uh, and as one gets more into it, they tend to leave aside some of the other things they would normally do, like hanging out with friends, or doing events with family members, or um, having free time to do other things, like go to the gym, or you know go to the bar and hang out, or stuff like that. Like a lot of those things start going away as people get more entrenched into their religion, or spiritual organization, whatever you. And that is very cult like. But then there are also arguments that say that organized religion is different from cults. One being the organization itself. Like usually it doesn't uh, it doesn't necessitate being in a group apart from your loved ones, whereas many cults do. That's usually a requirement to sort of separate you from your normal life. Most relig- most Whereas most organized religion don't do that. Some do, and you could easily say that those are cults. Oftentimes, they expect uh, copious amounts of money to be uh, given to the leaders of these religions and organizations. Conan says someone tried to get me into the Church of Scientology. The guy was creepy. Oh, I'm pretty sure he was. I remember when I was in college, there was still that Japanese cult on campus, and they kept trying to get people to come to one of their meetings. I forgot the name of the Japanese cult, but I remember they were the people who committed like suicide over there in Tokyo. I think in the subway system or something like that. And it was the same group, the Moon, something of the Moon, or something like that. I don't remember the name. It's been so long. Um, but yeah, they were definitely a cult. Then there was a political cult, because cults, not all cults are religious. You can have social cults, you can have religious cults, you can have political cults. So there is a political cult that used to be head up by this guy named LaRouche. I'm not even sure if he's still alive. He might be, but every year he would campaign. He would do campaigns across college campuses, um, supposedly to you know for raising funds for LaRouche to eventually run for president. But it turns out that the guy has been doing this since like the 80s and 90s, and really has no strong intent in actually running for president. Um, and mostly he had just been using his endless campaigning as a source of revenue. So the guy is pretty old, and this was like 20 years ago. The last time when I was on the campus of my alma mater, that the LaRouche people were walking around passing out information. Uh, I remember but they were definitely an example of political cult. So much so that they were in my social psychology textbook as an example of a cult. So that I remember when they came into my anatomy and physiology class, I was trying to warn the professor that these people are a cult, but she was trying to be nice and let them actually speak during the lecture. Which, first of all, they're interrupting her lecture, so I wouldn't have been nice about it, but she was nice about it. I'd have been like, you need to get the fuck out. This is not uh this is this is not appropriate. He said, "There's a church. Is there really a church of Beyonce? That bad breath track wearing bitch." Yeah. Let me change my chat filter here. But yeah, um, so like I said, so you have political cults, you have social cults, you have religious cults. Some can be a combination thereof. You also have sports cults. You can have a sports cult. For instance, within the BJJ community, there are some very cult like behavior. But I'm gonna leave that aside. I want to get back to religious cults and whether they are the same as organized religion. And so I already gave like a little context for how religion and cults could be the same thing, but I wanted to now give a little bit more context to how organized religion would differ from cults. Like I said, one, typically organized religion does not separate you from your loved ones, which is a characteristic technique of cults. Uh, two, two, they don't often require you to become as a member a person who's constantly doing a lot of stuff for the religion itself beyond passively attending uh the like church meetings and maybe giving tithes or whatever you would call it in Judaic in Jewish or Muslim temple gatherings. I don't know if they give donations of money during the Sabbath in Jewish and Muslim traditions, but in Christianity, they like to tithe you to death. Tithe, 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 tithe. Let all thine be all mine. And I didn't even make that up. There's a church that my father used to go to in uh I believe in Temple Hills, Maryland. I think it was the Bethel AME Zion Church, and I believe that that church was in Temple Hills, Maryland, which is part of PG County. Um, and I remember during a particular sermon, he literally said, "Now let all thine be all mine," and he started laughing, and so everyone else started laughing along as well. And I'm like, "Why are y'all?" And I'm thinking to myself, "I'm like, why the fuck are y'all laughing?" He literally meant that. I was like, he may have said it to be funny, but he meant it. Because why would someone say something like that, like "let all thine be all mine"? Like fucking goof. But yeah. So anyway, my point is, usually with organized religion, there's not a requirement that you be sort of like a someone doing, running a lot of stuff for that church as a member. Normally, as a member, the only thing you're expected to do is, pretty much show up, um, pray along with the sermon and maybe give some tithes. That's pretty much it. Whereas in a religious cult like the church, this what was it called, the Church of Science, not, I'm not talking about the Scientology church, there's a different one, the church, uh the Church of Christian Science or whatever it's called. They are very cult like, so much so that they don't allow their members to receive medical interventions. So if you are ailing or dying of an illness that can be treated medically, they don't allow you to do it. So the Christian Science Church is definitely a good example of a religious cult. Carlton says sports cults are ridiculous. I consider street gangs cults. uh, that's interesting. Are street gangs cults? I would say they can be. So basically, if it's a gray line between a cult and maybe just like a organization or or a religious um, locale, or in the in the case of street gangs or whatever. Uh, street gangs can definitely be cults. I wouldn't say that all of them are cults. They're not sports cults though. They would be a that would be an example of gangs would be an example of a social cult, not a sports cult. A sports cult would be like people who spend their whole life dedicated to like BJJ or something like that. Um, to the not just that they're dedicated to their sport, but that they are so dedicated to their sport to the exclusion of everything else. That's when it becomes a sports cult, that you are so entwined intertwined with the practice of that sport, of being around other people who practice the sport, that everything you do revolves around the sport. That is definitely an example of cult behavior, because um, again, there's a difference between dedication to that sport and or the or basically being so intertwined with the practice of that sport that you exclude literally everything else that has nothing to do with it. That is very cult like behavior. Um, and I would say that about, again, a religious cult, like that someone becomes so dedicated to the religion that it is to the exclusion of everything else. Like they no longer care about being in touch with their loved ones. They no longer hang out. Um, they may they may restrict how or what or when they eat. Um, they may they may no longer have a sex life, or if they do have a sex life, it is dictated to them by their superiors within that religious organization. Definitely, definitely marquee signs of a cult. um, but yeah, I would consider street gangs a sort of social cult, not a sports cult. Carlton says people are saying our lineage is a cult. FBA, no, it's not. People are only saying it because they're mad that we're delineating from them. And the irony is that black immigrants have delineated from us since they started coming here, and probably did so because they thought it gave they thought it gave them higher social prestige to not be considered amongst black Americans. Now that they realize the immigrants actually have less social status than black Americans, they want us to no longer delineate and say, well, we're all black. What does it matter? Blah, 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 blah. Or they will say delineation that of FBA is a cult. Again, I don't really take seriously the opinions of morons, but to answer them, no, it's not a cult. And it's actually described within, anthropology. It's called ethnogenesis. Black people have been separated from their cousins over on the continent across the Atlantic for over 400 years, and we've developed our own culture. Um, we've adapted to, you know, the American way of life. Um, our language has changed. We biologically we have even changed because foundational Black Americans uh, are on average 22% European, uh, as far as our genetics are concerned, and that may be more or less depending on what region of the country. So generally, it'll probably be less than that 22% if you live in the southern, the southern states, whereas it'll probably be more than in some of the northern states. But either way, we're genetically distinct from our cousins in the Caribbean and in Africa. Our our social our socio cultural um, characteristics are different than them. Uh, and serious. And besides that, who gives a fuck what they think? Like, they have a whole continent to themselves, and they can't even have one successful country. They don't have one successful country amongst 54 countries in the African continent, and most of those are sub-Saharan countries ran by Black African people. Not one of those countries are successful. Not one of them. Not one of them. Most of them are in a most of them are in a state of disrepair and corruption, and in a large debt to the uh to like the IMF. And in any case, they have no room to talk. They really have no room to talk. Like, they sub-Saharan Africans have an average IQ of 68. 68, which doesn't speak for individual Africans, it just speaks for them as a group. But as a group, they have an IQ that border that would, uh if it was applied to an individual person, that person would be clinically retarded. Okay? So I don't want to hear shit from them, from Black Africans saying we are a cult. They are mad that we refuse to work alongside them. But fuck them, because for decades they would say me no black, and call us akatas. And if you don't believe me, there was an African literally saying that in the old movie with Wesley Snipes, called Sugar Hill, when they were drug dealers and they were trying to do a deal with some African drug dealers, and he said, "I don't, I don't." He's like, I don't do business with akatas." But in the movie, that was supposed to mean cotton pickers, but we know that akata really means a wild bush cat, a wild African bush cat. But whether it meant cotton picker or African wild bush cat, the insult is still the same. And the nerve of them to be insulting us when they were the ones who were the fucking slave traders. Like, people always want to blame white people and Europeans for buying trading slaves. They were picking up on something that was already being done in Africa before the transatlantic slave trade. The huge thing was the Arabic slave trade. On top of that, there were there there were Africans that were enslaving Europeans in the Barbary slave trade off the coast, off the Barbary coast. There were more white people being enslaved off the coast of uh, the Barbary in North Africa than were black Africans sent across the transatlantic slave, during across. Sorry, again, tongue tied. More than black people, they were sent across the Atlantic during the transatlantic slave trade. So this was in their DNA, enslaving people, and being that they're so tribal, they never want to consider themselves black because they rather go by, oh, I'm Hausa, oh, I'm Yoruba, oh, I'm Igbo, and all that other dumb shit. The nerve of them to be completely tribal in their own countries and then get mad when black people decide to delineate. Mind you, even though we're delineating as an entire population across one country. Unlike them, they delineate amongst each other within their same countries amongst the different tribes. So, in any case, the point is the reason why black people, foundational black Americans, are delineating is not due to some cult like thing. And even if Tariq Nasheed coined the term, he is not our leader. He's just someone who happened upon a term that we all gravitated towards because it works. It is a because it is a useful term to describe us. But even before we had foundational Black American, we had the American Negro and we had the freedmen. They all referred generally to the same group of people whose ethnogenesis started in colonial America in 1619, a year before the Mayflower arrived. We were sent to replenish the workers in Jamestown, Virginia. And so we arrived here a year before the Mayflower did. And on top of that, there were some black people already here because they were in the Spanish colonies. So there were even some black people here before 1619 because they were already here in the Spanish colonies. And foundational Black American isn't a cult; it's a description of us because we've been here from the beginning since the foundation of America. Literally before there was the United States, we were already here in colonial America in the 13 colonies, not to mention amongst the other colonies of Great Britain, France, Spain. So fuck fuck their feelings about they don't. And the next time, and by the way, Carlton, the next time they even try to say they were a cult, ask them to define what a cult is. I guarantee they won't give you a useful description. It's going to be a very, it's going to be circular. They're just going to say, well, this, you guys are a cult, and this is why and this is why we consider it a cult. It's going to be something very circular. At best, what they'll do is they'll try to Google it, and then they'll try to retrofit FBA into what they Googled for the term cult. That's what's going to happen. But again, FBA is not a cult. It doesn't matter whether people like it or not. It doesn't matter whether black Africans like it or black Caribbeans don't like it. Fuck them. They delineated from us all the time. Every time they achieve something, they will say, "Yeah, we're Nigerians. Yeah, we're Jamaicans. Yeah, we're Dominicans." Um, or whatever, whatever. But whenever the police start slamming them against the ground, oh well, we're black too. You said me no black. They were like, me no black, me no black. We not akatas, me no black. Fucking Sudanese and Somalians was talking about their Arabic. So no, go ahead and be Arabic. And them motherfuckers still slave trading in those little Muslim African countries. Still slave trading. They're still slave trading in West Africa as well. In West Africa and in Central Africa. But it's most but is but it's mostly being done in those North African countries and in East Africa that are the most closely connected to the Middle East. The parts of North Africa and East Africa connected to the Middle East. That's where you're still seeing a lot of open slavery going on. As I mentioned before, Mauritania didn't criminalize slavery until I believe it was like 2017. You guys can fact check me on that. It was either 2016, 2017, or 2018. Either way, that's really fucking recently done that they did that. Now, on the books, it was illegal in 2003, but they didn't criminalize it until like 2017 or some shit like that, which meant it was openly going on without punishment. And is still openly being done across North Africa and the Middle East. There's still African slaves being bought and sold and traded across North Africa and into the Middle East. Why is those some Egyptians say they're not African? So yeah, so I dated an Egyptian in college, really cute girl. The only reason we didn't stay together is because I caught her kissing someone. And anyway, so she she used to always say, well, that her family got mad when they would say they were black because there's this common misunderstanding within the black community that somehow ancient Egyptians were black, even though they're clearly a Semitic people today. And when I say Semitic, I don't mean they're Jewish. Semitic refers to people, generally refers to people of the Middle East and North Africa, which are people of Jewish, Arab, and Berber stock. Um, so genuinely, Egyptians consider themselves Arabic, more or less, and they are. Um, and so I agree with her. I say, well, yeah, you guys aren't black, but you are African. She was like, well, so she thought about it. She's like, well, yeah. I was like, of course. I mean, Egypt is still in Africa. I was like, you guys are African, but I was like, I agree, you guys aren't black, and it's ridiculous that people try to say that you were once black, but then turned into another race, and now you're not black. I'm like, but that your ancestors were. I'm like that. I was like, I agree with you. Black people can be quite annoying with that. We both laughed about it, but I did force her to not force her, but not force her physically, but I did like epistem- epistemologically force her to admit that yeah, Egyptians are Africans just by virtue of the fact that Egypt is in Africa. So she did admit that, but we both agree, yeah, Egyptians aren't black. They aren't like I said, I saw her little sister too. They look just the same. They had like they look, if if you didn't know where they were from, you would just think they were from the Middle East, or you might think they were Latina. But yeah, but that's because a lot of Egyptians are Christian. She's like a lot of Egyptians are Coptic Christians. The Coptic Church is just as old as the Roman Catholic Church. Where they actually split was during the Council of Nicaea. The Coptic Church of Egypt and Ethiopia didn't go along with the creeds of the Council of Nicaea, and that's where the Coptic Church and the Roman Catholic Church kind of split their ways. And then the Roman Catholic Church split from the Eastern Catholic Church over the uh, over the concept of the papacy. So the Eastern Orthodoxy rejected the supremacy of the Pope. Um, so anyway, that we don't need to go into all that. But what the do I need to time you out? Spicy Great Return. Do I remotely look like I'm talking about blacktivities? That is your one and only warning. Same thing with or we Bonifacio, whatever the fuck your name is. Like, if you're not gonna be a part of if you're not gonna stick to the subject, just shut the fuck up. Anywho, getting back to religious cults, because now we went into political cults and social cults, and then trying to the attempt of detractors of Black Americans to delineate themselves as a cult, which is not. It's an ethnogenesis. Many ethno-racial groups have undergone ethnogenesis because of their unique cultural and historical traditions. People within the Jewish diaspora have experienced the ethnogenesis from the times that they arrived in Europe, mostly like Eastern Europe, and as and had different lineages. So that's why you have like Ashkenazi Jews, which are the German Jews. You have the Sephardic Jews, which are the Spanish Jews. Um, you have the Ethiopian Jews. So you have different lineages because of the ethnogenesis of those specific people going to different places and having unique cultural and historical traditions as a result of their migrations to these different places. That's what kicks off ethnogenesis. It is not. It is so to put it, and I'm gonna put this to rest. But it would be just as ridiculous to refer to European Jews um, as a cult as it would be to refer to Black Americans as a cult. Just because we're now referring to ourselves as FBA does not make us a cult. It's just that we're choosing a more precise term to delineate ourselves because for a long time we were all put in the census um, under one rubric, which was Black and African Americans, and that's a problematic term. Afri- Rest in peace to Jesse Jackson, but his term African American was stupid as shit because it allows people who aren't even black but came from Africa to still be considered African American technically when they come here to the U.S. So by that standard, Elon Musk is African American. Indians from Uganda and Kenya who come over here are African American, but typically African American was specifically meant to refer to the American Negro, the freedmen, the ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery, or the FBA, the Foundation of Black Americans. That's to whom it was meant to refer, but African American is an imprecise term. And a lot of us don't like using it because why call ourselves African American when we've been out of that continent for over 400 years? It doesn't make sense. And we've been robbed of our specific tribal and ethnic roots. So we started our own collective, again, whether you want to refer to it as American Negro or Black American, Foundational Black American, American Descendants of Slavery, the Freedmen, whatever. We are a unique heritage, which is distinct from the Black immigrants who started coming here in the 70s, as well as the Black Caribbeans. And a lot of them don't like that because when they start doing census polls, they're going to realize that most of the people who make up the Black American population in America are mostly FBA. The places where you're going to find the highest concentration of Black immigrants is going to be on the East Coast, whereas the majority of people throughout the South, throughout the West Coast, throughout the Midwest, are all going to be foundational Black Americans. And even on the East Coast, the majority of them are still going to be foundational Black Americans, but you're going to find the highest concentrations of Black immigrants in the New York tri state area, as well as places like Philly and Baltimore and DC. But outside of those actual cities, the majority of the Black people are still going to be foundational Black American. That is not a cult. It's a lineage started by ethnogenesis that we weren't, that again was forced upon us through human trafficking. We didn't have any decision in the matter. So then to call us a cult to basically define our lineage is insulting. And that's why I'll leave it off with that. I want to get back to religious cults. So again, the question is where do I stand as far as religion and cults? So I don't feel a need to go to the wall about this because I think I could be wrong. But as I see it, there is a useful I don't know whether there is a genuine distinction between religion and cults because often a cult is just a new religion starting up. Christianity was once a cult. Uh, Islam was once a cult. Judaism was once a cult. Mormonism is still considered a cult among some people, even though that is an organized religion. Some people still consider Mormonism, which is the church of Jesus, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter Day Saints. By some people, that's still considered a cult. Um, some people consider evangelical Christians a cult. Okay. Uh, to Roman Catholics, they, as far as they're concerned, they're the only legitimate Christian church, and everyone else are cults. Although I don't think they would put it that way, but someone who might be a really hard nosed Roman Catholic might in a time in a time where he might be free to express himself might have that feeling that pretty much the Protestant and Eastern Orthodoxy and Coptic churches are basically all cults and that they're the real deal because according to definition the Roman Catholic Church was started by Jesus himself. You can even Google that or you can put it into Siri, and they both will tell you that the Roman Catholic Church was founded by Jesus. So, according to the Roman Catholic Church, they're the only legitimate church, and everyone else are cults. So, it depends on how loosely we want to use the term. But I will say this, um, and I'm gonna put this in a way similar to like how Willard Van Orman Quine, the 20th century analytic philosopher, did a use made his distinction between analytic truths and synthetic truths. So Quine made a distinction between synthetic truths and analytic truths uh, by saying that analytic truths were uh, basically uh, were sentences that were uh, true by just by virtue of the meaning of the terms, whereas synthetic truths were true by some were true by virtue of expressing 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 a sentence that's true of the world. But later, philosophers came by and shown how both how a truth can be sometimes analytic or can be both analytic and synthetic. So it's not a genuine logical distinction, but it is a useful distinction in for most philosophers to talk about in synthetic truth versus an analytic truth. We still use that distinction even though we recognize that it's not a genuine distinction. It's still a pragmatic distinction. And I think that's the same thing we can say about organized religion versus cults versus religious cults is that there is a useful distinction to be made between organized religion and religious cults, although the I don't think it's a genuine organic distinction because pretty much anything you can say of a religious cult, you can say of organized religion to some degree. Not to mention, you could say that a lot of religious cults are just newer religions, whereas organized religions just are more established religions embedded in that have the luxury of being embedded in a deep historical context, where the newer religions or the cults don't have that historical context. But the useful distinction is that we can often talk about these organized religions in terms of their uh, utility to society, the fact that they often won't um, require their members to to pull away from uh, their loved ones or from society, as many religious cults often require their members to do. Nor will they require them as a member to then take on basically an unpaid job within that organization the way religious cults will uh, often make you do, although both will put you in sort of a grooming process to put you into those cults. But again, then you can say the same thing about fraternities and sororities, that those are cults. They are very cult like. They have very cult like behavior, but they're not cults. But there's a grooming process in fraternities and sororities, of course, to get into those societies, into those secret societies like fraternities. But I think there again, there's a useful distinction to make between cults and religion, just like there's a useful distinction to be made with cults and some secret societies like fraternities, or other things out there. And again, trying to call a lineage of people a cult just because the people don't like the fact that they have started to delineate themselves from uh, other immigrants within their racial diaspora is very disingenuous. So, unless anyone else has any questions on that, I guess we can put this to rest because it's late and no one's really saying anything else it was, except for a few good good replies from Wise Up 786 and from my moderator Carlton Way One. They were giving good feedback, of course, as they usually do, and then we get a few morons, but that's to be expected. But unless anyone else has anything to say about that, I don't feel the need to go more in depth about it. Like, I'm wet for all these religious discussions and debates I've been having this week and last week. I haven't gone that much into depth. I'm way willing to do so, but only if there's people in the chat room that are willing to dig. And I'll look. Um, I will supply the shovel and I will do the digging, but I need someone to remove the dirt when I shovel it. And if I'm the only one with the shovel and I'm shoveling and no one's willing to remove the dirt, then it's no need for me to go too far deep into it. And this retard saying, "What was this live about?" Like, you should have looked at the fucking topic, you idiot. Like, the fuck. I get so tired of people just jumping into a live saying what this live is about. Go smoke some dope or something. Anyway, guys, I'm out. Take it easy. I will be back with another religious discussion on in this train of thought that we've been doing for the past 2 weeks. Again, tomorrow, same bat time, same bat channel. Peace out.